Please excuse the interruption while I share some important information about the Sunday Morning Coffee Podcast. If you would like to support the show, and believe me, I appreciate you supporting the show just by watching, there are a couple of ways that you can help out. You can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/smcpod. That's patreon.com/smcpod, where for just $4 a month, you can receive early access to episodes and subscriber-only content. If you prefer to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly donation, you can head over to buymeacoffee.com/smcpod. I'm not going to spell that one out, but it's spelled exactly as it sounds. buymeacoffee.com/smcpod, where you can make a one-time donation in any amount. Your support does not go unnoticed. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your support, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's episode. Very happy to welcome Catherine Gairard to the show today. Thank you for taking time out to speak with me.
Thank you very much for having me, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Meet you as well. I've been looking forward to it and just going over the material that you sent me. Very interesting, very wide variety of talents that you have. So if you just want to start by maybe letting the audience know a little bit about you, where you got your start in art, what you started with, and so on. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I am a musician and an artist, and my dad, he's a painter. So I started with art with him teaching me how to draw and paint. And then in school, I will always do like the dancing. And I am Peruvian, and in Peru, we love to celebrate everything. So Mother's Day, Father's Day, every day. And we will always prepare like shows, even either dancing or singing or poem reciting or whatever. And so I will always be participating into those events. And so I always knew that I wanted to do something in the entertainment industry, either acting or music. So I studied theater, and then I realized I really missed the music. So I decided to switch for music, and I released an EP in 2020. And today I am preparing myself to enter in a program for learning to compose music for movies.
Very interesting. And so I noticed that you are a harpist, if that is the correct term for that. Is that the first instrument that you picked up when you were learning music?
No, my favorite was always the voice, but the thing I started with was the guitar actually. And then I did a little bit of piano. I tried the violin for a couple lessons, and then I had to choose like with which instrument I would start with. And for some reason, I chose the harp. I wanted to like go deeper on the harp, and then when I get a decent level on that, I would like to try another instrument. But for now, I'm very happy with the harp.
How much does it help to, when you're learning an instrument, doesn't matter what instrument, guitar, harp, whatever, how important is it to already have a basis in other instruments? Does it help to learn, does it help to have a background on a different instrument when you're learning another?
I guess that obviously each way you play each instrument is gonna be different, but you still are developing that coordination between your different hands and your mind and what you want to do, and sometimes your feet as well. For example, with the concert harp, it has pedals, so you can have to always also coordinate with your feet, and so this coordination definitely helps. But I think the most important thing is to have some notions on music theory, because if you know how chords are built, for example, like which notes are in which type of chords, then you can translate that knowledge from an instrument to another, because the notes themselves are going to be the same, and what change is how you produce those notes on each instrument.
At what age did you learn music theory? Was that something that you learned very early on, or did that come a little bit later?
I that came a little bit earlier. I am self-taught at the beginning because at first my family didn't couldn't afford lessons and we lived quite far away from the city. So after with the internet and the rise of platforms like Coursera, for example, I started learning from there and from books. And I'm very intellectual, so I like concepts and studying and have like a very mental approach at first. So that was like the most accessible thing for me. So I started there, and then I added like the physical training with the instruments, even though I already did the guitar. So with the guitar and the learning the music theory, it went kind of in a parallel motion, let's say. But yeah, I decided that since I didn't have much money for uh, hiring teachers for the instruments and the voice, I would at least try to catch up with the theory. So I ended up being very good at theory, somehow writing songs that I would record on score writing software like MuseScore or Sibelius, this type of thing. So it was kind of strange. Like it had a very mental approach to it because of the theory that I was learning, but at the same time, there were so many things I wasn't aware of that the process would end up being actually mostly intuitive. And so that led to music that was very different to what I myself was used to listening to.
How do you appreciate, or do you appreciate music differently with the knowledge that you have in music theory? Because obviously a huge music fan as well, but I'm sure that you probably and others that are knowledgeable about music theory and love to learn about it, you probably hear things somewhat differently because you're aware of, like you said, chord structure,
Mm.
the how a song is put together. Do you find that now that you know music theory the way that you do, that you hear things differently?
Yeah, there are songs that I used to like in the past that I can't listen to them anymore because my mm, consciousness of what makes a good song for me at least has evolved. So there are things that I just cannot listen to anymore, and then there are things that are not like masterpieces but I still like because they have like a catchy melody or something that I enjoy from that song. So it doesn't need to make you like an elitist either. Like yeah, there are songs that are very simple, very plain, and I still enjoy them from time to time. But it definitely opens up your horizons. It's like culture, right? If you don't learn music, you they can sell you anything and you will like it simply because you haven't heard other references that show you that thing is actually not that good, right? So it's important to cultivate yourself in that regard, but having this balance between cultivating yourself, not swallowing anything that you are given, and at the same time not be an elitist. Like this happens a lot. For example, certain classical musicians are like, no, if it's not purely classical, it's not worth it. Or jazz musicians, if it's not jazz, and heavy metal musicians, more fans than musicians in that genre are like, if it's not metal, then it's not worth it. And a musician needs to listen to everything he can, and that will nourish your knowledge of music and the tools and things you can get inspiration from. So in the end, you cannot really reinvent the wheels. Like everything is encrypted in the music, and if you follow this intuition, you kind of get there. Even if you don't know what you're doing, is like this thing guiding you. And there were a lot of things that I was doing, like let's say blindly, And now that I am having lessons with a composition teacher, he's helping me getting aware of what I'm doing. And the advantage of being aware of what you're doing is that if you want, you can systematize that. Like, I have a song that I structured in this way, and that's why it works. Oh, why not creating, like, if today I have no inspiration, why don't we go from this same structure that I already used and that I am aware of to create something different, right? So having a system allows you to create more and more efficiently, and like having a system for good music to come out. If it's just like the stars and dreaming, it can happen once and then you have to wait a lot before the magic gets again, when you can actually train that to happen whenever you want, right?
Hmm. And it's a good point that you make, because I, read a lot of and watch a lot of videos about, musicians and bands that I enjoy, and often they are asked, who are your influences, or what, did you listen to? And it's often, like you said, it could be a heavy metal band like Megadeth, who are one of my favorites.
Mhm.
And when you ask them about their inspiration and their influences, it's a very wide. It's not just heavy metal. It's
Mhm.
many different kinds of genres of music. So I think you're right that having that sort of open mindedness, I think it's more common among musicians than it is fans, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You, if you keep um, feeding yourself from the same thing, like, if for example, if you just want to listen to heavy metal from the 80s and that's all your world, it's very difficult that you will create something unique and actually make the genre move forward, evolve. It needs to evolve. And also because music is very tightly related to memories that one has.
Hmm.
I think for older people who have experienced the golden age of rock and roll and heavy metal and their youngest years, and they have heavy, really great memories related to that, it's difficult for them to let that go, quote unquote, and like appreciate the new music that is coming. Also, the marketing makes that we are hit in the face with a lot of music that is of questionable quality, and it demands a little bit of effort from both the artist and the fan to go search for that good music. So it gives the impression that there's no good music anymore. And one, there is this attachment to the memories of the past that they want obviously to revive, and that's normal. And then there is this sort of like veneration to the past, where I noticed that most people like my age and so sometimes they, it feels like they don't want to defy what has already done, and they end up doing the same things. And I remember a scene with a friend, a musician friend I have, like he's like 65, so kind of like a dad for me.
Hmm.
And I was with him just talking, and someone on his Facebook sent him a demo of a song, and he listened to that, and and it was like he was laughing, and he was like, I was doing that in my 20s. And he's 65, so his 20s are the 60s, 70s, probably, I don't know. And so it's like, it has been done before. And even, at least for the old musicians, they want to see new and fresh and unique. So um, the point is that obviously you respect the people who came before you, because they, you are now, as an artist, you can support yourself on, like, rely on that past discoveries or work. But in a certain way you also have to defy what has been done and try to and all the music and art movements from history work that way. Like, if in a classical period, that is Mozart and Haydn and all these, they had a very logical way to work. And then in the 19th century, with the romantic movement, they were looking for something else. They were looking for, we need to put more emphasis on the melody, and it has to portray like very passionate emotions, and the material has to be very well crafted. And like if you see Beethoven's music, for example, he was like in between those movements, like the end of classical period and the beginning of romantic movement, and his way of working is very classical. Is with nothing, with just a rhythm pattern, I can develop a complete symphony from that, and it's just this little capsule of sound, three notes, like the fifth symphony is like ta 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 ta, and all the whole symphony is built upon that little capsule. And if you see Chopin, for example, that's well into the romantic movement, he's the king of melodies. Like his melodies are crafted to the detail, and they progress and evolve, and it's very different way of thinking, and it has to be that way. And then in the postmodern period, they will defy what the romantics did, and so on and so on. And now with the rise of film music, for example, apparently we are in the post-romantic movement, which I love. I love the romantic era in general, 19th century literature, music, art, etc. And so being like in the post romantic is like, it's a revival of that. And I love that.
You make an interesting point about not being sort of typecast into one certain genre, because my favorite artist of all time is Bob Dylan. And
Mm-hmm.
he obviously started out in the early 60s in the folk
Mm-hmm.
movement. And then in the mid 60s, as we all know, he went electric and really made a lot of people in the folk movement angry. But he has had so many different sort of phases in his career. He was the folk, and then the folk rock. He's done gospel. He's done country. He's pretty much everything. And he just refused to be, put into any type of box musically, which I think is incredibly important, especially because if he wouldn't have had the longevity that he's had, I don't think, if he had just played the same type of music for 50, 60 years.
Yeah, it's just too long for just experimenting with one single thing. And I love that because at the same time it's understandable, because I feel that still today in general we kind of welcome the fusions more than before. And in those times, the rise of rockabilly was like an explosion in on itself, and everything was happening so fast, and it was very limited. Like rock and roll was the thing that kind of started with this idea of being united as humanity, because in the US at that time, like in the 30s, 40s, you had like pop, which was like the music of the really the white people in the cities, and then the white people from the countryside, they would have country, and then the black community will have gospel. It was even more divided because they have gospel and blues, and gospel was like the good music, the God's music, and if you are decent and moral, you would listen to gospel. And if you were a creature of the night, in the nightclubs and weird stuff, then you will be listening to blues. And then Rosetta Tharpe comes, and she starts mixing blues and gospel, and she's like, no, because there's light in them too, and God tells us that we need to help everyone, so we can bring the light to that night world, right? And that was so beautiful, and she was criticized a lot as well. And then rockabilly comes and starts including elements from country, from pop, from blues and gospel, and so suddenly, apparently, you could have both types, like every type of people from different backgrounds singing and dancing together to a rockabilly song and being united, and that was really beautiful. And that was the very young people, and that's how this whole teenager culture is born, like music for teenagers, things for teenagers, right? And the very concept of teenager. And then those teenagers grow up and they start being more mature. It comes the 60s, Vietnam War, all those things. They start to like life forces them to grow up fast. And then I feel like folk comes in like as a way to cope with that, with all those things, and to try to like, if you would listen to folk if you are a grown up adult, and rockabilly was almost for children already. So maybe the fact that Bob Dylan breaks with that status quo and puts the electric guitar and it's like, no, we are adults and you are making us listen to electric guitar, and like a music that at that time rock and roll was like very light, fun lyrics, double sense lyrics, and then he takes that sound and puts like mature lyrics on them, right? Like that make you think. And then he starts influencing John Lennon on that, and it's just forming, and then we get to lyrics like Iron Maiden, and even some songs by how is this called, Black Sabbath with War Pigs, which I love that song that has heavy elements from country, like in the voice, the way he sings is very country. um, yeah, and it starts growing towards that. It's amazing.
It is amazing for sure. One of my favorite things to do is to go onto YouTube and watch reaction videos of people listening to somebody like Bob Dylan for the first time, and just the how blown away they are by the words, and how well the words go with the music, and to see young people sort of catching on to that kind of music, and you come back a week later and they're reacting to another and another and another. I think we're in a really good time, in that regard, because there's so many different ways that people can discover new music and expand their horizons that I didn't have when I
Mm,
was 20 years old. I basically had, my friend group who listened to all the same kind of music, very limited options on the radio. So I
mm.
think I think today, with YouTube and Spotify and options like that, I think it's a very good time for being exposed to different, not only music but different art forms as well.
Yeah, yeah, but it's more necessary than ever to have a culture to be able to discern between what is really art and what is being sold as art. Like, and it's very difficult to answer that question because it's very personal. But I feel there are objective guidelines that we can take, and the most simple one I can think of is that it puts you in a somewhat state of contemplation, like it makes you present in that moment, and you just listen and you're like, wow, and my mind is like silenced for a moment, and I'm just letting either the music or the painting that I saw or even the movie or that book is sinking in me, and I just have no words. I feel that is art, and it doesn't need to do that to everyone. But if it does for a certain type of people that are open to that type of art, because I can, for example, see, I don't know, the Mona Lisa, to give a very well known example, and maybe I feel nothing when I see the Mona Lisa, but the Mona Lisa has moved millions of people. So there's no question. You can say, well, it's not my style of painting. It doesn't call to me, but you many is you cannot deny it's art. It's like you see it, you cannot say it's not art. And then you can have a lot of pieces that say nothing and they have been like inflated, like I don't know how you say it, like hyped it has been
Hmm.
hyped, and there's a lot of marketing and money behind that, and a certain interest, and you feel like you have to, like, there is this mind gymnastics, like this all philosophical story that the author is doing around the piece. And if you feel like if you don't follow along with the narrative, you will be spotted like a like an ignorant person or something, and your inner s- being, your spirit is telling you that's a piece of rubbish. But they do that narrative and they try to convince you, no, it's because you don't understand, like this whole blah 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 blah, and it's just noise. And it's like, basically, if you have to justify your piece, it's probably not art. I'm sorry to say, it's the art speaks for itself. It's like a creature you have made, and now it's out there, and it will speak for themselves, and for the people they have to speak to. And those who don't hear anything, because that's fine, still cannot say that is not art just because I don't appreciate it, you know. So that would be my little advice. And then to study as much as you can, to research. There is the internet. You can study a little bit of music, a little bit of literature, of art history, at least to listen to podcasts on that, on those areas, to form as well a knowledge, because it's not all, you need to have like logic and intuition on point, both, and they both tell you which is art and which isn't.
So let's go back to your childhood. You mentioned early on that you were exposed to a bunch of different art forms when you were very young. Do you recall if there was a first piece of music, a first film, a first whatever that maybe made you fall in love with art, or were you just constantly exposed to it? And it was there something that you remember as a child that you loved that sort of kickstarted your love of the arts?
I I've always felt like that's like my purpose, to do art. That's what I came from. I came to and came here for. And there's not like a single particular moment. It was just a series of circumstances that just I was being drawn to it from on
Mm-hmm.
in one way, like, and just follow these the signs, the traces. You know, I just was following that.
I think you're definitely right about it just sort of seeps into you, because one of the things that I often mention, and I laugh about it now, is when my father was born in 1929, so his music was 40s, 50s, 60s, that kind of era. And
Mhm.
he used to, I remember, he'd get up early every morning and he would have the country music radio station on, or he'd, on a rare occasion, he'd play records, which were old school country music. And,
Mhm.
I was, of course, an ignorant teenager at the time. And I would always scoff, oh, this music's crap. What does he listen to this for? And now, as I start to get older, I'm in my early 50s now.
Mhm.
I completely hear that music in a different way now than I did then.
Mhm.
And I will see a record in a record store that my dad had, and it will bring back those memories
Mhm.
that at the time I just kind of scoffed at it, but now it's completely different. So you're absolutely right that art, in whatever form it is, it sticks with you.
Mhm.
Even though you may not at the time think it's sticking with you, it definitely does.
Yeah. Yes. And whereas something that's not real, you'll forget about it. If it's a trend, you will probably follow the trend, and then there's going to be another trend, and then no one is going to talk about that piece anymore because it was just a trend, a moment in time, a product that was designed for a certain result. Or even if we talk specifically about music, I feel there's music that is specifically done for the nightclubs, and that me personally, I imagine, because I don't drink, but I just can imagine the only way to sort of enjoy that music is being drunk. And sadly, it is not in that spiritual positive way that it was, for example, for psychedelic music, where there was music designed to be listened to when you are high. And so you would have like a sort of a sensorial experience, that a global sensation experience, with all the images that you could have, that music would produce on you. So it was like, I feel, for the things I read, the 60s was a time where, when those drugs, LCD, etc., appeared, people were very innocent about it, and artists especially, they were trying to find like inspiration and a spiritual awakening through that, which wasn't like the best path to that, but their intentions were pure in that sense, and the music that came from there, I feel that that also contributed to the maturity. Like Pink Floyd, for example, has that heritage, and maybe Supertramp as well has that heritage, and the lyrics are very like down to earth, like very awakened type of thing. But today is just some music is just pure evasion, pure unconsciousness. Is There's no, absolutely no awakening looked for. It's all the total opposite, like numbness and noise, a noise that you can only stand if you are out of yourself, to be honest, at least for me. Like,
And
I've seen.
it's definitely, that kind of, the kind of music that you're talking about, that you hear in a dance club, in a nightclub, because you're really not there for the music. You're there to be with your friends, like you said, to get drunk, to dance. And that music is obviously great for that purpose, but there's not anyone sitting in those clubs pondering the depth of the music or the
Of
lyrics.
course.
So yeah, it's definitely, different. It's designed for that purpose.
Yeah, but you can have, and there is music like, so some types of electronic music. Like, I can think Avicii is very well known, but I love his music, for example, and that is music that, if there was that on a nightclub, I would gladly dance over that. It's fun. It feels positive. Like, he was a positive person. And then there are even a silly example that I like giving is a Disney song, that from this Shake It Up series with Bella Thorne and Zendaya, and it has this song that is called Watch Me, that is in that electronic pop genre, and it's so fun to dance on and to listen to, and it's interesting musically. And of course the lyrics are not like wow, but it has certain things, because Disney sometimes puts a little bit of depth in the songs. And that one is like about not being afraid of showing who you are, something like that, almost always in those lines. But the song in itself is very interesting, and like this type of music on a nightclub, you wouldn't need to be drunk to want to dance over there, and it would be so much more positive, and create so much better energy. Like, the few times I've been in a nightclub with friends, it always ends up in some drama, in some couple being fighting, and stories, problems. And I believe it's this negative energy that is entertained there with that music and those substances, that shouldn't be necessary to have that to have fun. That's like, how can that even be fun?
Yeah. I want to get back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, talking about Beethoven.
Hmm.
Um, there's a song, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it or not, by Kanye West, called "Runaway,"
Okay.
and it starts with one piano note that he plays, and then there's maybe a 10 5 second 10-second gap, and he plays it again, and then the note changes, but the whole intro to the song is basically two or three notes that then
Mhm.
kicks into, um, and that's not even a genre that I am very familiar with, but I love the song, and it's just so simple how
Mm.
how it starts and then it builds into its crescendo. How do you feel about that in regard to building a song? Do you feel that sometimes it is just something so simple that it forms basically the foundation to the whole song? What are in your mind? Are there other examples of songs that start with, maybe a note or a couple of notes that just form that basis for that whole song that makes it iconic?
Yeah, there's many songs that are very sometimes uh being simple is exactly what you need. Like, I don't know, The Sound of Silence is a very simple song. Really,
Mm-hmm.
musically, it's a minor scale, normal, natural minor scale, just a guitar, two voices, and it's about how much can you do. That's where the true art lies as well. That you have minimal stuff and you make it come into life, and you express something and you move people, and that song has touched so many people, I'm sure, and that message is so deep. That's what's important. Like, you can get overly technical, and it's very easy with complicated musical concepts to become really pretentious. Like, oh, I will put this negative harmony or whatever in here, or this modal interchange, and start doing this blah 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 that I was talking, with a lot of musical concepts that only musicians know, and to kind of seem interesting, or just to pile a lot of complex things together for no reason, and then the piece is boring. Like, I rather do very simple stuff that you build upon, and you actually express something. And also, sometimes you have an idea that when you just play it in the piano, it sounds lame. And in fact, there was an exercise on my preparation courses for music, cinema music. And the idea of the exercise is that you do four sketches, like very small sketches of melodic ideas. And then you will pick the worst of those four. And the worst one is the one that you would actually orchestrate. So it was a way to prove to yourself that no idea is really a bad idea. It's just that sometimes we're very perfectionistic and we want the masterpiece. And the masterpiece doesn't come from heaven like that. You work your masterpiece, just sculpt on that, and then it becomes a masterpiece. And I have had many songs that were very simple, very repetitive, and like, I love this melody, but it feels like too simple. And then I just start orchestrating that, and then it's like, wow, I am so glad I haven't given up on that idea, because actually so good. Sometimes we are too cruel to ourselves, like too exigent, and just do it.
I think your point about simplicity is a very good one because one of the things that I find is if I'm listening to an album or a band that has, let's say, a guitar virtuoso in it, I find the songs are often more about the guitar player than the guitarist than the song. So you'll get,
Mhm.
a verse, a chorus, an 8-minute guitar solo, like it almost seems like they are just like, oh, look what I can do on this
Mm.
instrument. And it's incredible. Their talent is incredible, but to me it takes away from the song because it's more about the guitarist than it is about the song itself. So
Yeah.
your point about simplicity is, not don't overdo it is very good advice.
Yeah, it's what about what the piece needs. Like, does this piece really need this super complex guitar technique? Maybe yes, maybe not. Depends on what you are saying. And this is another tip that I can give to distinguish true art from fake art or wannabe art, is that whether they know it or no, the artist is always has always something to say, and he or she must not be even aware of what they are needing to say, but there's something here inside that just wants to come out, and it feels in. I have songs that even today I don't know what I'm talking about. I myself it just came from within, and that's fine. You don't need to explain again everything, but there is this desire, this thing here, that there's something that has to come out, and something very visceral. And sometimes for many reasons, like the artist has an ideology, which is fine, but then they try to put their art to the service of that ideology, and that's when they completely actually lose it, because then it becomes a sort of propaganda. Even if it's a good ideology that is good, it's still a propaganda, because you have subordinated the art to that pre-given set of ideas, where actually you should let the art speak for yourself, and whatever has to come through comes through, and that's it. And obviously many things about the things that you believe will influence your art, but I feel, at least in my experience, that is the feeling that the situation, for example, of the world or a certain event, is more what you feel about what's happening rather than what you think about what's happening. So that's why the more personal you are with your art, the more universal you become, and it actually is for greater service to humanity to do it that way, because you are this part of God that is seeing this experience from this point of view, and you just give it away for the other fragments of God to get nourished from those perspectives. And that's why art is spirit food, because it really comes from within, or from high above, however you feel it.
Well, they asked, I can't remember if it was Larry King or a different interviewer that asked Bob Dylan about writing his early songs, and where, Bob Dylan basically said, I have no idea how I did that. And that sort of gets back to what you said about some of your own, like, where did that come from?
Hmm.
So yeah, just sometimes it just flows out of you, I guess. I wanted to ask you about recording your EP. So that was in 2020, as you mentioned, and you also said that you're a big learner. You're intellectually driven. Did you dive in to learn about the recording process, about music engineering? Did you dive in to learn about all of that before you recorded your EP as well?
I was focusing more on composing, um, and on improving my singing technique. So now I compose better, I sing better, and the all the technical part of that was very difficult for me to tackle, because I spend a lot of time training my creative mind, and then there was a disbalance with my more logical, technical mind. So I'm trying to balance that, and so I'm making the effort. Like this EP, I recorded in the studio with a producer who was taking care of that part, and it's actually better when you send your music to someone else to mix, because they will have another experience, another equipment, etc., and it's always going to be better. But it's good to know how to do a pre-mix that is already, like, for example, for cinema music, sometimes you will have someone who will mix your music, sometimes you won't, and when you don't, you need to be able to do something that's already like distribution ready and that is decent enough. And so you need to know how to do like a basic pre-mix that already works, and that is, yeah, distributable. So that's good to know. But it's always better to work with other people. It's like more heads in the process, more spirits in the process, and obviously it makes it bigger, other experiences as well. But right now, yes, in the present moment, I am focusing more on balancing this part and getting the hardest for me, all this technical stuff. I'm always fighting with logic, fighting with all those programs, but it's getting along step by step. I'm already managing to create things that are already somewhat listenable. um, yeah, from this technical point of view, yeah, it takes time, but
Mhm.
we'll get there.
Yeah. You also mentioned in your bio, you've mentioned, obviously, you mentioned earlier dance. You mentioned in your bio modeling. Um, Both obviously very different than music.
Mhm,
In terms of, let's go to the modeling side of it first. Um, there can be an art. There's definitely an artistic side to that.
mhm.
How does your dance and your music background assist you in when you are in a different art form, such as modeling? And what type of modeling were you doing?
I was doing mostly like nude art photography, and dancing comes in very handy for that because of the figures and positions, how you even simple things as how you put your hands. The flexibility helps you to do poses that otherwise you wouldn't be able to do. It gives me other ideas on how to use my body and transform it somehow into something else from the point of view of the image, and suddenly is telling a whole different story that goes beyond the fact that I'm nude on the picture. So that's there's different actually schools of nude art. You can have the very abstract nude art, which is really this idea of going beyond the fact that like when you see the picture, you see like could be like an animal, like an emotion, something, and it's you are not focusing on the fact that there's no clothes. And then you have boudoir, which is more sexy. There's lingerie, etc., which is interesting too. And I kind of find myself always like at some point I wanted to experiment with boudoir, and we started the session, and then to the end of the session I was already going towards my more artistic abstract style, like okay, that's me. I kind of was in like in between type of thing where we will be like a very, let's call it an emotional boudoir type of thing, where it will be the sexy part of it but it will be something else behind, which is very interesting. I love both types of photography. They're very elegant as well. Then you can go to the extremes with that, like very artistic or very even not explicit, but like with good taste, bad taste, of course. And then there's people for everything, and you choose which one you want to do. And at the same time, your character and your values as well will always drag you to a specific type of thing. So
You talked earlier about the you got the artistic side of your brain. You've also got the logical side of your brain. Since you're involved in so many different, your music, dance, modeling, etc., etc. Does it help to have that logical side of your brain to sort of help organize all the different things that you're doing? Do you sometimes find that you maybe get off track a little bit with one project if you're involved in so many different things? How does the logical side of your brain keep you focused?
yeah, for the logical, I feel that where it comes in the most handy is in the mindset. Like we fall for many fallacies, like our brain falls for fallacies like the available information fallacy. That is like, for example, oh no, but I know a lot of people who did that, or who got sick of this thing, or who died from this thing. And it's like, that's the available information that you have, but that doesn't make it the truth. The truth is, take the numbers. How many people have been killed by this thing, really, objectively? And they say, oh, maybe only 100 people, or 1,000, or 1 million over 7 billion people. Maybe this is not such a big deal. Or then you have the spotlight fallacy, which is you do something stupid in public and you feel everybody's watching you, everybody has seen that, and not at all. Everybody is on their own things, but you just happen to do something embarrassing, and therefore you feel like everybody's watching you. There is this, I don't remember how this fallacy is called, but where you throw a coin and there is how you call it, face,
Yep. Yep. Heads
face,
and
face,
tails.
face.
Yep.
Uh-huh,
Yep.
exactly. And so many faces that have come in a row, that this time you bet for the tail, because you kind of believe in that sort of a balancing force of the universe, when actually every time you throw the coin there's 50-50
It's still
probability.
50-50. Yep.
And so on and so on. And one of those fallacies is like the imposter syndrome and things like that, where it's like you need this logical evidence to counteract your mind, say, hey, I'm not an imposter or anything. So you build with logic and with work and actions this evidence, and then you use the evidence, and that's very logical, right? This is facts, right? And then for organizing myself with all the things, I rely a lot on priorities. Like, what's my priority right now is my music. That's like my main thing that I chose. And then dance is gonna be my sport to stay in shape and become stronger and flexible and stay strong and flexible. And then drawing is something that I will do from time to time, or when I am doing my videos, then I do my animation. So you have priorities, because you cannot do everything at the same time in the same level. It's impossible. So prioritizing what's most important right now, it's important. Avoiding distractions is important. Saying no to things that most people say yes to, like going to nightclubs till 6 a.m. in the morning, because yeah, it's not only that following days, it takes a huge toll on your health, so,
Hmm.
and your focus. So all those things, like things that don't align with your goals, you basically say no to, and that is discipline. It's hard. Took a lot of work, but step by step and getting there. Yeah, it's a training, it's a process.
So, what project or projects are you working on currently?
So right now, all the creative projects like the albums and so on are a little bit in standby, because I'm studying for that momentum program for the cinema soundtracks, and something that I really am excited about. I want to get to do that. Like, I love cinema, I love fantasy movies, 3D animation in general, and I was like, I wish I could do that. Doing music for movies is so fun. And then I found the program, and I was like, this is a sign from the universe. I was asking for it, and I enrolled directly. Like, I have it very clear. So that's like the next goal, to do that. But I still want to keep working on personal projects like albums and stuff. I also love writing those. So
That's great. Well, before we wrap up, if you just want to let everybody know where they can find you, if you want to share a website, your social media, anything that you want, this is your opportunity.
yeah, I am on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube as Catherine Gairard. Uh, all same pictures. So CATHERINE. And then the last name is Gairard. So you can follow me on those. And for now, also on my YouTube, I started creating like small movies for just practicing my movie soundtrack composing. And I
Mhm.
love comedy, so it's for example, the last one that I uploaded is When You Hate Valentine's Day. So
That one will go over pretty well, I think.
oh, I hope so. So yeah, that's the project by right now.
That's great. Well, I will definitely share those links on the episode description. And I wish you all the best in your course. I can't wait to watch a movie and see your name in the credits as the musical composer. That'll be a great moment, I'm sure, for you. But all the best going forward, and look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you very much for having me, and let's keep in touch.
We shall. Thank you, Catherine.